Well, hey, what's up? My name is Tony. I'm a filmmaker, photographer in the St. Louis area. Right now, we're in the midst of the coronavirus crisis all over the world. I hope and pray that you're staying safe. I've actually been dealing with some of the mental side of it, not necessarily the physical effects that some people have been having, but the fact that I haven't been able to be around people and I haven't been able to do my portrait shoots and just kind of this anxiety about money, all of these things have kind of been affecting me so that I haven't been able to produce creative content nearly as fast as I have in the past. And so I just decided I was going to take a few weeks off of YouTube and get back into it when I feel a little bit more healthy creatively. Which, if this is something that you're struggling with, don't try and push through it and just pump out garbage content. Take your time, take care of yourself, whether it's mentally, whether it's physically. If you're struggling with some of the sicknesses, I just encourage you, feel free to take the freedom to embrace that break. I think it's healthy for you. So I feel we're kind of past that. I've spent some time on my motorcycle. I've spent some time outside going on hikes and just kind of soaking up some sun and just kind of refreshing myself creatively. So here we are. This is the beginning of May. It's a new month, and so hopefully we've turned the corner and things are going to start clearing up here in the U.S. In Missouri, we've honestly haven't had it that bad, and so they're opening up things. Actually, today is the first day that they're starting to reopen the ecosystem, and we'll see what happens here in the next few weeks. But it's time to get back to making some YouTube videos. Speaking of which, a couple weeks ago I posted a poll on my community tab. If you haven't checked that out, I post behind the scenes photos and polls and all sorts of random things occasionally. So go check that out if you haven't. But I posted a poll a few weeks ago on what I should be working on next and got a surprisingly amount of people who are curious about a cinematic B-roll tutorial. So that's what we're going to be starting today. I'm going to roll out probably 3 or 4 of these episodes of this series that we're going to talk about cinematic B-roll and what that means and how to shoot it, how to color grade it, how to set up your camera, what gear you need, all of that kind of stuff. So that's what we're getting into today, which is pretty exciting. So why don't we get into just what do I mean by cinematic B-roll? Well, here's a quick example. So basically what B-roll is to me is just all of the supporting footage that you have to help tell your story better. You've got your A-roll, your dialogue, whatever it is, like what we're doing right now. This is the A-roll. And I'll just add in supportive footage to help tell that story or get a different perspective that helps the viewer understand just a little bit better. If I'm doing a tutorial on a lens, I'll try and get some nice shots of the lens. I'll try and get some shots of the lens being used. All of that is B-roll because it's helping tell the story of what this lens can do. So what we're going to talk about is in this video is how to set up your camera and what gear you need. And honestly, if you're shooting on the EOSR, you've got some good gear already, and chances are you're not going to need anything special to help get better cinematic B-roll. When we're talking about cinematic style, that's just that really nice, professional looking, a little desaturated, very smooth, a little bit of a slow motion. And I'm going to talk through how I get my cinematic B-roll to look so good through the EOSR. This is a really popular, it's a really powerful camera, and I just encourage you guys, stick with me through this this little series on how to shoot cinematic B-roll, and you'll be shooting it like a pro in just a few weeks. So why don't we get in to talk about the gear that you need to shoot cinematic B-roll. First thing is obviously the camera. We're going to be talking specifically about the EOSR, but you don't need the EOSR. I've shot incredible footage on the SL2, which is an entry-level camera. I've shot incredible footage on the 80D. In fact, I've made a lot of money with that 80D. Whether it's portraits or video, you can get a lot of really good quality video out of a camera that doesn't cost much money. But because, I'm a really big, huge supporter of the EOSR, that's what we're going to be using. That's going to be the settings that we're setting up, and that's going to be our primary base for the gear that we're using. When it comes to lenses, if you want cinematic, the most thing you can do is have that really blurry background. And the way that you get that is by fast lenses, f1.4, f1.8, f2.0. You can even get it on some of the kit lenses like the f4. This is one of my favorite lenses right now. It's the 24-105. Love this lens. And you can even get some really creative cinematic B-roll on this lens. And so I'm just going to talk through how to do that even if you've got a kit lens that doesn't have a very fast aperture. Another thing that's really going to be beneficial to you is to have a variable ND filter. If you're shooting video, you really, really need to have a variable ND filter. I'll list some of these products down in the link below, but I use a Tiffin variable ND filter, nothing fancy. I've used some of the Polar Pro ones, and I cannot justify how much money they are for what they do for basically the same price as some of the others. Other than that, you probably should have a decent microphone off camera. You can use on-camera mic audio, but I like to really capture natural audio and mix that into the mix to help it sound just a little bit better. So I'm just going to suggest the Rode Video Micro. If you don't have a microphone, I've done a couple videos on this mic, and it is just an incredible microphone for $60. If you want to spend a little bit more, you can pick up the Rode Video Mic NTG, which is what we're using right now. I think it sounds really nice, but for the majority of people, especially if you're just catching natural audio, just use that Rode Video Micro. Industry standard right now. It's just incredible. I use it for weddings. I use it for talking heads. You can get it off the camera and use it that way. I've got a video tutorial on that. Just really nice, easy, beautifully sounding microphone for $60. Pretty crazy. Another key component to think through is how to get really smooth, stable footage. Now, obviously, you can do this on a tripod. It's not very easy to get movements, but you can do it, and I will give you some tips and tricks on how to get smooth cinematic B-roll with a tripod when we get to that point. Another thing that you can use is a stabilizer like the DJI Ronin S. That's one that I use very frequently to get good, solid, stable footage. Another thing you can do is even use a camera strap, and we'll talk about some of these cheaper routes, maybe something that you have laying around your house so you don't have to go out and spend $1,000 to get better cinematic B-roll. So other than that, that's basically all I really suggest. You need a camera, you need a lens, and some way to make it stable. And then audio is obviously a benefit. So for this example, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be shooting exclusively on the EOSR. And I'm going to use the 24-105 just so that you can't say, well, I don't have a lens that's good enough. At f4, you should be able to get some good cinematic B-roll, and I'm going to give you some tips on how to do that. And then we're going to be using the Rode Video Micro mounted on the Ronin S. I'll also do some examples that aren't on the Ronin S, just for people who don't have a stabilizer. You don't have to run out and get one, but that's going to be our setup. The EOSR 24-105, the Rode Video Micro, and the Ronin S. Okay, so why don't we move on to settings that I use when I'm capturing cinematic B-roll. The first thing that you want to do is set your camera's frame rate to 60 frames per second. Now, you can shoot at 120. I'm not a huge fan of 120. I'll maybe talk through that one day with you, but for right now, I love 60 frames per second. So go ahead and set your camera to 60 frames per second, all eye full HD. That's what we're going to keep the camera on for all of our B-roll. I always shoot in 60 frames per second. The next thing you want to do is move on to your white balance. Now, white balance is a little bit more tricky because obviously it depends on the environment that you're in, but it also can help you portray a mood or feeling. So if you want something a little bit more dark and cold, then you need to lower your white balance even more so than what it really should be. So, daylight is 5600. If you want it to feel a little bit colder, a good example of this is Ozark. Man, that show is dark. We've gotten into it, but it just drives me nuts because all of their footage is very blue. And what they do is they just lower that white balance to get that look. If you want it to look a little bit more like sunny and warm and summery and golden hour on the beach, then crank that up to like 7,000. It's going to feel nice and hot and warm. And so you can really use your white balance to help portray the mood and feeling that you're trying to capture. And so I'd suggest playing around with some of the presets on there, your sunny, your cloudy, your shadows, your tungsten lighting, all of those things. Just kind of play around with what they are and just dial in what you want your white balance to look to help portray your mood. Like right now, I'm not shooting at 5600. I'm actually shooting a little bit higher because I want it to feel a little bit more warm. And it's kind of a cloudy day right now. We got rain coming in, but that makes really nice soft lighting for video like this. All right, so moving on from there, let's talk about the exposure triangle. That's your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO. So if we're shooting at 60 frames per second, that means that your shutter speed is at 1/125th. You never move it. That gives you the best motion blur you can have, 1/125th, and that's where the ND filter comes in. You want to be able to control your exposure with that, not with your shutter speed. When it comes to the aperture, lower your aperture as low as it can go. Right now we're at f2.0. I could go to 1.4, but the background looked really blurry. But if we're doing B-roll, keep that aperture just wide open. Chances are, if you're shooting on the EOSR, you're going to be able to handle it. And then your ISO, you want to keep as low as possible to get the best footage. If you're shooting in C-Log, that's 400. If you're shooting in a standard profile, that's basically everything outside of C-Log, that is at 100. And then you just adjust your lighting, you adjust your variable ND filter, all of that to do your exposure. And if you've got questions on exposure, I talk through that a lot in a in an EOSR log settings video. I'll post here and I'll also link those in the description below. But watch those if you've got any questions on how to properly expose your video. Other than that, let me know if you've got any questions about settings that you might set your camera on. I'm going to use autofocus. I use it a lot. I use the iDetect one. That's just basically what I use most of the time for video. I'll also use the single point. And I'm going to do a video on how I pull focus with autofocus when I've got a small crew. If I've got other things that I'm having to worry about, autofocus usually does the trick. With this camera, it's got great autofocus if you've updated it to the latest firmware. So other than that, let me know in the comments below if you've got any questions on specific camera settings that you are curious about. I'd love to chat with those through you. But for the most part, those are the major ones that we're going to talk about. It's just the exposure settings, shooting a log, shooting an autofocus, and you're going to be able to get some really good quality cinematic B-roll. All right, guys, if this video has helped you, I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel, like the video, comment below, all of those things that you need to be doing to help build this channel. I just really appreciate all the subscriptions that I've been getting lately. I've got like 1,750. I never thought I would have that many, and so it happens so fast, and I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you guys, and we're just going to continue to grow and learn. The next video we're going to be talking about is how to shoot cinematic B-roll and how I get it to look very cinematic and make it just look nice and smooth and buttery. So make sure that you subscribe, hit that bell notification thing if you're into that. If not, I'm sure I'll catch you some other time. Thanks, guys. Have a good week.